Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Table Stakes Podcast. I am so excited to continue our conversation today about athletics and the Olympics and carbon and environment and all things with it. We are joined by Lew Blaustein, who is the head of EcoAthletes. Katie Yoder from our team also joining us today as our resident EcoAthlete, because Katie is, I think you're an EcoAthlete. You're doing all the things environmentally friendly, and you are a fantastic athlete. So, Lew, Katie, thanks for joining me today. I'm excited to continue this conversation about the intersection of athletics and environment. Lew, welcome. Tell us a little bit about you and give us the kind of background and 101 on EcoAthletes.
Well, first of all, thank you, Marcy. Thank you, Katie. It's great to be here with you and talking about the kind of underreported, until now, starting to grow sector or intersection of green and sports and environment and sports and climate and sports. So I run an organization and founded it, EcoAthletes, in April of 2020 to inspire and coach athletes to lead climate action. And why did we do this? Well, the thing is that athletes are the most influential humans on the planet. And this is not just me talking. I mean, I am talking and saying these words now, but it's not just me. It comes from data. And data going back to 1900 shows that athletes are up here, popular musicians, whether they're rockers or rappers or anything in between, are here. Actors and actresses, also the Kardashians, whatever the heck they are. Politicians, scientists aren't even on the list. And I'm not even making a value judgment on this. I'm just saying this is a fact. And athletes have led on all manner of social issues. And I'll use the US as an example. I don't know the rest of the world, but their athletes as well are doing the same. But from civil rights, right? From the Jackie Robinson to issues of war and peace, i.e. Muhammad Ali and the Vietnam War, to women's rights and Billie Jean King, to LGBTQ rights and Billie Jean King. And now in the more recent era, Megan Rapinoe and equal pay for women athletes, Colin Kaepernick and police brutality against African Americans, the entire WNBA, it seems. And yet, on climate, which to me is the existential issue of our time, and even if you don't buy that, I think it's fair to say that any issue that you think is the defining issue of our time is made worse by climate. And yet, athletes are on the sidelines for the most part on climate change. And this even goes for athletes who are environmentally active, athletes who've been involved with things like plastic ocean waste removal campaigns and e-waste recycling drives, etc. We're not going there on climate. And that's what I saw as something that needed to change. And it was because of fear was holding them back.
And Lew, you mentioned, oh, sorry, Marcy.
No, go ahead, Katie.
Okay, you mentioned previously a couple key reasons when we were chatting earlier of why you think athletes are on the sidelines or maybe afraid to take on this issue. And I just wanted you to cover like those key reasons and also why you can debunk them for those athletes.
Sure. Great. Such a great question. So the three reasons I've talked to athletes, and how I got into this was back in 2013, I started writing a blog called Green Sports Blog about the nascent kind of intersection of green and sports. And I started to talk to athletes who are environmentally active, but not going there on climate. So I would ask them, why are you not going there on climate? And the same three issues kept on coming back. One, it's too sciencey. And I don't feel comfortable talking about a topic about which I know little. Two, it's too political, and I don't want to stick my neck out on a political issue. And three, and this is one we get the most often now, is some version of, I'm gonna get hammered on social media for being a hypocrite because I fly all over the place for my sport and my personal carbon footprint is through the roof. So I would hear these obstacles, and I had a laundry list actually of retorts or rejoinders to it, to say, wait, no, okay, I hear you here, but here's the reality. And I thought that, wow, I could help them neutralize this fear and or turn a negative into a positive. And from those conversations, that's where EcoAthletes was born. Because, as I said, the mission is to inspire and coach athletes to lead climate action. The way we try to do that is to provide our growing global network of EcoAthletes champions, which now numbers 170, with the tools to advance from climate curious to climate leader. And included in those tools is coaching to overcome those fears.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I've told Katie, I'm a huge baseball fan. not a Reds fan, but I'm now a Brett Suter fan because I've seen that Brett Suter is an EcoAthlete.
He's
But it's
awesome.
interesting because I think it's really easy as an athlete, right, to think that it's difficult for you to take on climate change, and it is. But I love, like, I've looked as I've gotten to know your organization, and I've looked up sort of Brent Suter in the MLB. A lot of what he talks about are things like reusable containers and not drinking, out of so many water bottles. And it doesn't have to be a deep science-based carbon conversation, although it can be, right? It can also be about individual actions that these athletes are taking on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yes, and so I say yes, and so on that, issue of the science, I always say, it really doesn't matter. You don't have to know the science. Just like a scientist doesn't have to know how to hit 102-mile-an-hour fastball. And actually, even a better analogy is this. And I've used this in public speaking. Like when I speak to student athletes, high school student athlete groups, college student athlete groups, I'll ask them to raise their hand. I'll say, how many of you have gone to a children's cancer ward to cheer the kids up? And depending on the group, 20 to 80% of them will raise their hands. Okay, then hands come down. How many of you are oncologists? And they all go some version of, whoa. And then they get it. You just have to know that you care. You just have to show that you care about the current lives and the future of the people who care about you. And the science is not something that is your responsibility, other than to say, of course it's happening.
Well, and it goes back to, as well, the majority of scientists in the world agree, right? The
Not
science
even the
is sound.
majority, like
98%, right?
99%. Like we're talking like it's not, it is as climate scientist, Dr. Michael Mann, who is on our board, says, it is as settled a fact as is gravity.
Yes. Yeah. So we don't need you to tackle the science. We need you to continue to build your profile. So
we need you to advocate, and we need you to going back to your point before, yes, the actions, the small actions, like what not small, but individual actions, like what Brent did with the Strikeout Waste program, where he eliminated single-use plastic water bottles in the brewer when he was on the Brewers dugout, and put refillable water containers in the clubhouse. He did this because when they would show the post-game interviews, there was always by the dugout, and the camera would pick up all these water bottles strewn around, and he thought that was not sending the right message. So Brent is such a good example, and I'm glad you brought him up. So he'll do that, which might be seen as, okay, that's a little thing. He'll also, speak to his member of Congress about, on his own, climate issues. Not everybody's going to do that. However, more people will do that, the more confident that they are about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
on that note, I think, like, as you mentioned, the types of message athletes want to send, like, I'm curious, how do you get someone from, like, what makes an EcoAthlete an EcoAthlete? So how do you get them from that climate curious to climate leaders? What type of resources or trainings do you provide them that can allow them to feel confident in speaking to Congress, or, to motivate people to take little actions in their days, the
Another
entire
great
range?
question. So what we have is, we call it our resource hub, and there are 5 branches to the hub, and those are the tools that I mentioned that we provide to help the champions advance from climate curious to climate leaders. So those tools include mentorship, and in mentorship includes one-on-one sessions with champions who are not confident about talking about it, where we find what their points of vulnerability are, and then we work on flipping that. And these are in one-on-one or one-on-two sessions, and those have proven to be quite popular. We also, another branch is community, because athletes often feel that they're alone on their team, in their sport. With EcoAthletes, they're not alone. We have community chats every couple months, where we have either outside speakers come in. Now, more recently, we've had our champions have volunteered to speak. We have several WhatsApp groups, which have proven to be very popular. We have a broad one for, we have, like I said, 170 total champions. Over 100 are in the main WhatsApp group. We have a WhatsApp group just for our Paris Olympians, of which we have 18. We have a moms WhatsApp group among athletes who are moms. We have a Canadian WhatsApp group, because the Canadians are really into this stuff. So we have that. We also, in community, have Champions Network-wide activations that, I'll just give you one example. It's called Clothes for Good, as in the clothes we wear. The apparel industry, depending on the metrics and the studies you use, are between 4 and 10% of total greenhouse gas emissions. And yet we are told that we have to buy more stuff. And especially in the sports world, we have to buy an extra, a third uniform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the athletes themselves are kind of drowning in swag. And so what we do is, every month or two, we put out this content that the athletes can share on social with their followers, as to how they can make their clothes a force for good. And it's mostly things like, wear your clothes longer, know where you're buying them from, turn them into other things, upcycle them, etc. And the last one we did, which featured 3 of our champions, got 100,000 plus views, which for a grassroots organization like ourselves is a big deal. So that's community. Then we have social media. We teach them how to talk about climate on social and deal with people who come back at them. And then we have another branch is another branch is thought leadership. And that's where once the athletes, either they come to us and they're ready to talk about this, or they work those other branches I just discussed, then they're confident. We get them on podcasts like this, and we get them to speak at panels, and we get them to go to conferences, virtual and in person, and then we get them on traditional media, and we've had them on ESPN, NBC Sports, BBC, Sky Sports in the UK, all and other places, all other big media outlets around the world. And then we do endorsements with green brands. And so that's something we'd really like to grow, especially in the college sports space, since our fastest growing cohort of champions are NCAA student athletes, and now there's NIL, which allows them to. And so we did the first climate themed NIL program in history with 5 Rutgers University students back last year. So
That's
anyway,
amazing.
so
What I'm
hopefully I
curious
answered your question.
Yeah, I'm curious what brands were involved, for instance, in that Rutgers piece, and are sort of eco-friendly brands and kind of green brands, how are they getting out there? Because there's a lot of competition, right? I mean, not everybody can bring Nike dollars to the table, but if you want to sponsor these kinds of athletes, what advice do you have for those sort of, eco-friendly brands?
Well, first of all, you're sponsoring the athletes, not necessarily the athletics department, or so this is a way to be able to sponsor athletes who are leading greening initiatives without the huge dollar signs that a sponsorship of, being the official blah 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 of Rutgers athletics, or and we're not trying to cannibalize that. These are, but imagine a brand that's a local solar company, or a plant-based restaurant. They don't have the zeros like that Nike does, let's just say. So that this would be a much smaller dollar investment with much smaller, you're not going to get all of the benefits that you would get for many more zeros. However, this gets you to show that you are a brand that cares about, that expresses your values, and that sees student athletes as valued ambassadors. Also, the vast, and I mean almost like 99%, like climate scientists who are saying that climate change is real, 90+% of NIL dollars goes to football and men's basketball and women's basketball at a select few schools like UConn and South Carolina, etc. The Olympic sports and the women's sports get next to nothing. And so these athletes, while the dollars that they would get from a deal like this would be smaller, by exponentially smaller than what a big time quarterback would get, they're getting some dollars that are meaningful to them, and they are being shown that they have value. And so they are so into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it during the Olympics, right? Who would have thought that 20 years ago that Snoop Dogg and Flavor Flav would be the heroes of the Olympics? But it was so interesting of, track and field athlete Veronica Fraley talking openly about how she's at the Olympics but needs to pay her rent and having a difficult time paying her rent, and Flavor Flav to the rescue paid Veronica Fraley's rent. But these are the kinds of things, right, that you're talking about of you might not be able to get the biggest name connected to your brand, but that sort of climate focus and the eco focus can bring really incredible athletes, whether at the college level or the Olympic level, sort of in line with your brand for something that maybe brands wouldn't have thought they could afford. And it really brings those partnerships to bear. So I think that's an interesting thing that I'll take away from this is, especially for, we talk to clients all the time about community engagement dollars and where are they spending their money. And this is something I don't think a lot of brands are thinking about. So
we have student athletes on right now, I want to say 25 campuses throughout the country, mostly D1 Power 5 schools like Notre Dame and Tennessee and Stanford and Duke, and they are committed, and they would be amazing avatars and ambassadors for a green or a brand that is aspiring to greenness. And that's one thing that we do for endorsements is we vet the brands to make sure that there is not a credible greenwashing charge that can be levied. Of course, anyone can charge greenwashing and we can't stop that. But if it's credible, then we will recommend not to pursue it. So that's a function that we take on. We're not agents, so if an athlete has an agent, the agent negotiates the deal. We can help in that if we are asked, but we are not agents.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's switch gears. I want to talk about the Olympics because this is what we've been focused on. It's such a cool time to be watching everything in Paris right now. You have 18, is that right? EcoAthletes at the Olympics.
Yes.
So tell us about your Olympic athletes. What are they doing in Paris? What kind of resources have they brought with them that they're able to bring their EcoAthletes champion status onto the ground in France this summer?
Well, a lot of it started even before the Olympics started. So one thing that our champions who are Olympians, the 18, really got into was engaging in campaigns to call out greenwashing or say inconsistencies amongst Olympic sponsors and doing it in a positive, let's make things better way. And so what does that look like? So there was an open letter that a campaigning organization organized to call out Toyota for its, talking about how green they are and then spending gobs of money lobbying against climate-friendly legislation all over the world, including in the US. They were very active in trying to kill the Inflation Reduction Act because in large part, they did not after being the leader on hybrids, they did not go big on EVs and they went on hydrogen, and EVs are 3 times less carbon intense than hydrogen. Hydrogen isn't winning anyway. And so Toyota's, well, anyway. So we had 14 of our athletes, Olympians, but it wasn't 14 from the 18. Some of them were past Olympians, but 14 signed on to that letter. Then we did a similar letter with, and the letter actually, just to be clear on the Toyota letter, it was aimed at the IOC because Toyota is their mobility partner. And that partnership is expiring after this games. And so the letter said, hey, IOC, you can do better with your next mobility partner. Make it a mobility partner that is committed to the electrification of ground transportation. That to me is a sweet spot where, where you're being solutions oriented. Then Lululemon, which has this very kind of yoga-y, very green brand image and has done some good things, but they talk the talk more than they walk the walk in terms of their greenhouse gas emission reductions, especially from Scope 3 emissions. And they are the Canadian Olympic team outfitter. They're a Canadian company. And so we sent an open letter with Olympians not from Canada. Understandably, the current Olympians from Canada couldn't do that. And so this is some of the intricacies of this kind of work. However, we got Olympians from other countries, and a retired Olympian from Canada wrote an op-ed about Lululemon that got published in Canada's National Observer, which is like Canada's USA Today. The point being, again, this was all, hey, you can do better. And the ask was that they reach time stamped science-based targets. And the campaigning organization, which is called Action Speaks Louder, got a letter back from the CEO
Wow.
of Lululemon saying, we hear you. We have a report coming out in September. Read this report. And implied in this is in that they would meet with the campaigning organization, or that's the hope. So this is the power of athletes, and this is the power of our Olympians. Now,
Well, it's interesting. So I have a friend who many years ago worked at Nike, and she talks about on her first day at Nike, sort of a incoming class of Nike workers. And one of the questions they asked this incoming class is, how many of you have a world record? And a lot of hands shot up. And how many of you were in the Olympics? A lot of hands shot up. And so it's interesting because she's talked about the impact of athletes who go into these companies and work, right? They go into Nike, they make a huge difference. They go into Lululemon and they make a huge difference. But it's exciting to see it happening from the exterior as well, because what we see every day is companies being pressed by their customers, by their supply chain, by their investors. And it's interesting within some of these individual companies where athletes are a huge stakeholder group for them, that they need to show up and do what the athletes are asking of them, and climate activity and advocacy is a part of that. So I love seeing that. That's awesome.
and so great example there, and our athletes that are, because there was a part of your question that I did not answer, which is what are they doing in Paris? And it varies. There are a couple of the athletes who have been posting on social about climate related issues, or the water quality of the Seine, or the heat, the extreme
Yeah.
heat in some of the events. Others, they're focused on their sport, and a couple went dark on social media during the
Sure.
games, which is totally understandable. But we're getting great response from the athletes who are there, including Elena Olsen is one who I'll shout out. She is incredible EcoAthletes champion from Team USA Rugby that got the bronze medal in an epic game that's gone viral, and she has really helped to green USA Rugby but based on her own initiative. And she was great in Paris about this. Another fellow, Rydian Cowley, deserves a shout out. He's an Australian race walker. He came in 12th in the race walking event. This is in
Race walking is like one of my personal favorite Olympic
I've actually
sports.
done it. And I finished. I decided I wanted to do race walking, would be better on my knees and back than running. And then I did a New York race walking walk in Central Park and came in dead last. Of course, I could have said, well, there's only one way to go, and that's up. But then I said, no, I'm going to do cycling. Anyway, Rydian from Australia is just on it, doing podcasts, producing content. And he is just an absolute godsend. And he is in tomorrow, or I don't know when this will air, but on the 7th, he's in the first mixed marathon race walk relay and has a chance at a medal. And
cool.
With fellow EcoAthletes champion Jemima Montag, who won a medal, and bronze medal in race walking on the women's side. And
Wow.
And so those two are worthy of mention. There are more, but you have time requirements.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I mean, congratulations, first of all, on what you've built and your team has built to have started this organization, in right after 2020, right? And to have
During
18,
COVID.
yeah, to have 18 Olympic athletes on your team of champions, just incredible progress. And it shows how much need there is and how much these athletes really want to have a difference. So what's next for you guys? Where does EcoAthletes go from here?
Well, that's a great question. What we are looking for, we are looking forward to a couple of new initiatives this fall. One is, and I can't give the details of it yet because we haven't announced it fully, but I can just tease it by saying that we want our U.S. citizen-based champions to lead an effort to get people to register to vote. As a 501c3 nonprofit, we cannot advocate anything in terms of who to vote for or party or individual, anything like that. And we're very clearly not doing that. However, what we can do is say, get people to register to vote. And so you can see stuff about that coming in the next several weeks. And then we will have in the early 2025, our third annual Collegiate Cup, EcoAthletes Collegiate Cup. And it is basically a competition among the schools where we have at least one champion. So 25 schools maximum could compete in it. And basically, it gamifies climate action with a company that we partner with called Climate Games from the UK. And they have an app, and it translates your exercise, your running steps, your erg rowing strokes, your pedal strokes,
Oh, cool.
into an environmental currency that buys offsets. And I know offsets are a very tricky issue. So
we did a podcast about that a couple months ago. So, jump on and listen.
We're very assiduous about that. So the offsets that we do are methane capture with immediate benefit, and it passes the but-for test. So the idea is the more you exercise, the more methane gets captured. And methane, of course, being 80 to 100 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2. The special sauce of this is that these athletes are competitive.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this is probably a
where they are.
dangerous game for a bunch of pro athletes.
No, these are college athletes.
Oh,
These are
okay.
NCAA student athletes. And what they want to do is they want to win the Collegiate Cup. So in 2024, Clemson won the first one in 23 in a rout. And then in 24, the same rower who drove Clemson's win in 23 was back at it in 24. But then she had a rival, a water polo player at San Jose State. And other schools were kind of like also into it, but just not at this uber level. So there was this like a classic baseball pennant race, but in the Collegiate Cup. And every week the leads go back and forth, but it was a 6-week competition that ends on Earth Day. And then the last week, the lead changed hands 4 times between Clemson and San Jose State. And the last day, it changed 4 times, with Clemson winning it in the last hour. And we quadrupled the amount of participation and the amount of carbon avoided in total. Wow. And so we are looking for a sponsor for this. And I think with a sponsor, we could exponentially grow this.
That's amazing.
I love that. That is so fun. Oh my God.
So cool. I will link the Collegiate Cup in our show notes so that people can find more information of it. If you know a brand that wants to sponsor Collegiate Cup, what a cool set of events. Very, very cool.
So that's what we got coming up with other stuff as well.
It's great. Lew, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been so fun to hear about your organization. We're going to share about you guys online, and hopefully more athletes will come your way, and more nil dollars will come their way, and all the things that go along with it, because money talks, right? So these athletes are really using their platform for good, and hopefully they can continue to do that with the right sponsors. So Katie, thanks for bringing Lew into our Table Stakes fold. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was awesome. Always a pleasure, Lew.
Oh, absolutely. Always a pleasure. And I had no idea that thumb thing was going to happen, but
No worries, you're good.
How
that's
did you
I
so
love
do
it.
cool. Well, it was great being on with you guys. Oh my
There you go.
goodness.
You got hearts
Wait,
too.
I want hearts.
I don't know what's going on, but you guys
Oh,
rock.
great. Thanks, Lou. Well, we'll continue to follow your Olympians taking home their medals, and we'll follow you on social media. We'll share all of that with our guests, with our listeners as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And
Okay.
thank you for the work that you're doing, and
You bet.
including with the podcast.
Cool. Thanks, Lou. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.